Well, look, a big welcome from me this morning, and thank you everyone for being part of this today. Look, I think loss prevention is a topic where QSRs can really benefit by working together and sharing stories and working collaboratively on. So with that in mind, I encourage everyone to get really involved today and send those questions in. I've got a few and I'm looking forward to hearing yours. Finally, a big thank you to Nicola from Krispy Kreme and Dominic from the Australian Retailers Association, and of course BizTech for co-hosting today. That's it from me. Let's get started. Over to you, Shane.
Thanks, Justine. Just by way of formality, we're going to place everybody on mute just to reduce the background noise, but we do encourage you to participate by asking questions. There is a chat facility, and we'll just quickly type something into the chat facility so you can see where that comes up. But if you do want to pipe in with a question, please just unmute yourself, and we'll we'll hopefully get your thoughts on what we're presenting. Okay, so the topic for this morning's session is the future of loss prevention, which we know is a key subject of interest for retailers across all industries. And our objective is to try and provide some insight into what retailers are confronting in this area and how technology is replacing the traditional gut feel approach by leveraging analytics to truly address this problem. We've planned this to be a relatively informal session. We're going to start with a short presentation from Nicola at the NRA, and then we'll hand over to Brad from Retail Defender, and we're going to round out with a panel discussion hosted by a team of experts who'll provide thought leadership and real-life stories regarding loss prevention. So joining us on the panel, we're fortunate to have Nicola Steele, who's Head of Retail and Development, Krispy Kreme Australia. We haven't actually spoken yet, Nicola. I hope you're there on the internet somewhere. Dominic Land.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us.
Good stuff, excellent. Great, Nicola, thanks for joining. Dominic Land, the CEO of National Retail Association, Brad Colbert, Director and Lead Architect of Retail Defender, and Justine, who is going to join as well, has collected a number of questions from the QSR audience and will be posing to the panel. This session is being recorded, I hope. Yes, great. Brad's given me the nod there. And we're going to make this available post-event. We'll be emailing out a guide titled 8 High-Risk Loss Prevention Scenarios Every Retailer Should Monitor. We also invite you to engage with our ROI calculator to understand the savings you could realise using a solution such as Retail Defender to address loss prevention in your organisation. Okay, so to get things underway, I'd like to hand over to Dominique, the CEO of National Retailers Association, to offer a very informed viewpoint on loss prevention. Over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Look, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the National Retail Association, but we are a union that represents employers. We have about 18,000 shop fronts across the country, and we represent anything from mum and dad in a pizza shop all the way through to the top end of town and everything in between. So all categories of quick service, restaurants and hospitality, as well as your traditional retail. So I guess sorry, I'm just trying to actually click my next slide here. Sorry about that. So look, I thought I'd just start with, why should we concentrate on or be concerned about theft? And what we find from our membership is that, look, they certainly are aware of it going on. Some of them are unable to quantify how much it's costing them, but we know that across the country it's about $4.5 billion per year. And that can be broken down into, the internal theft from employees, as well as, your consumers and vendor and supplier fraud. And, what's the impact on business? I mean, realistically, we're all probably aware of the cost of shrinkage, but also there are a number of follow-on costs to crimes like this. And this includes, lost sales and store downtime. It also includes workers' compensation claims from employees who may have the unfortunate experience of dealing with violent crimes or robberies. We also know that there is a number of costs associated with property damage, repairs, upgrades to retail outlets, especially where you are in a centre that requires you to make changes in order to prevent as high a rate of theft occurring. We also know that there is a loss of productivity and output from team members that are dealing with offenders, and also their time submitting internal police reports and and just managing stock levels. And then, of course, there is the cost of the prevention as well. And I guess, prevention is something that we need because we need to know exactly what we're losing, because ultimately it allows us to try and get the best chance to recover that loss. Now, in terms of recovering the loss, we know that a lot of theft is not reported by retailers. And what that means from us as an advocacy group is that it's very difficult for us to get the police to take theft in retail seriously, and it's also very difficult to get government to take it seriously. So what we've been doing is collecting data from our members so that we can funnel that through to the powers that be in the hope of getting support. And what we found is that there is now significant interest because we can map theft that's occurring in retail all the way through to drug trafficking, as well as a number of other things that fly off the back of that, including terrorism. So it is quite a big problem, and it's probably far bigger than what we've seen or even imagined in retail. Okay, so I guess what should you do if you're trying to identify theft? And really it comes down to looking at, where's your biggest problem? Is it internal? Is it external? We know that really about 55% of theft is a result of employees, which is a little bit scary because we like to invest in them and we like to trust them. But then we've also got the component of external theft. The big thing here really with external theft has always been safety and making sure our employees are safe. But the best way, I think, when we look at that 55% figure to prevent theft is to really look at your internal culture. So I've got some statistics there from Deloitte for you. We know that 90% of employees' fraudulent behaviour will be noted by colleagues but do not report it. We know 25% of employees will extract sensitive material from a system, and 92% of fraudulent behaviour is preceded by disciplinary conversations. So what I would say to you in those situations is you need to see changing your culture internally as an investment. Your employees need to understand that if they observe something, it is also on their obligation to report it to you, particularly your managers. And we also need to give them tools as to what to do if they see something or what to do when they encounter an aggressive customer or something along those lines. We know that in businesses where they've got small products and the value is high, they'll have an increase in theft. And we also know that Christmas increases the 5-finger discount as well. And look, how do you get to that point with a culture? I think it really comes down to how we're screening our employees, the fact that we have seen a lot of reduced supervision because of the cost of labour. The increase in part-time work is also added to this issue. And also, really, it's about easy sale of stolen merchandise. And that's really where the concern, certainly from the federal government and from a number of state police agencies, has come from, because it is that real resale of particular products. It's not just about kind of stealing an avocado anymore. There's definitely bigger things happening, including whole pallets of stock going missing, especially if they've got a brand associated with it, or if somebody's trying to get their hands on that. So, we are talking billions of dollars each year, and it's definitely worthwhile for us to be focused on that. So when I talked about training, it comes down to, especially when we're talking about external theft, managing conflict. We know that we have a lot of young workers in retail, so we employ about 1.3 million people each year. 55% of those are women, and we also employ about a third youth, so people between the ages of basically 15 to 25. And so putting them in situations where they might be bag checking, or they could be working late at night and somebody comes in to rob something, or even if they do catch someone shoplifting, or if they're checking bags, it's important to give them tools around what do you do if you find something in a bag. How much abuse do you have to take? And if obviously you find something like that, what's the protocol? Who do you report to? Do you have an incident report? Does it go to the police? All of those things. And then, of course, performance management protocols as well. So, we look at those statistics again, around 92% of fraudulent behaviour is preceded by disciplinary action. That means that if you have a performance management conversation, chances are you may lose some of your stock. So, without obviously following someone around a store, obviously it's very difficult, but it's important that you do increase supervision of an individual. You make sure that they are returning, to cultural norms, that they aren't acting out. And you also pay attention to gossip to see what's happening and make sure that the employees that are working around them are also observing their behaviours. Because that's ultimately how you're going to find out. You need people to tell you something's happening. I mean, you can rely on technology. CCTV footage, of course, is very helpful, but often a lot of the time it is word of mouth, and you need somebody to kind of, unfortunately, flag it with you. I have touched on safety before, but also just around your policies and making it very clear to employees what the implications of theft is. So setting out for them, what is their authority, and that might be inclusive of things like discounts. So if they're purchasing lunch and you give them a certain discount on food, making sure that they don't issue that to friends or people outside of what that discount is applicable to, and also picking them up on it if that is occurring, and just watching your systems around what's going through your POS system. And then, of course, accountability if you catch somebody doing that. Making sure they understand that they are accountable, and of course, and then what is the flow-on effect from all of those things as well. So, I mean, look, I find with employees, as long as they are aware of what their obligations are and what the consequences of those actions are, often it can be managed quite easily. So, look, we're seeing a lot of technology coming out, and, it's very exciting. There's a lot of facial recognition starting to crop up in our shopping centres, which, some people are afraid of, others kind of welcome it. It's been around for some time, but it's now something that we're moving towards. Collecting data, from employee theft and certainly from external theft is absolutely essential, and that's why that reporting and even information sharing is really important. So we recently commenced a pilot program here in Brisbane called Safer Streets, which has implemented a software system which allows retailers to put in data into a very simple platform, and then it can be communicated to other retailers in that specific area. And it also reduces police response time from 6 hours to 15 minutes because it's already in a format that, that you don't have to have people come out, take statements. You can take photos on an iPhone, you can upload them, all of those kinds of things. And that says how easy we need to make things, especially when it's got to do with consumers. And look, I think any technology that you choose to implement really needs to be user-friendly, and everybody needs to understand the importance of it, why it's there, and how to use it. It can be as simple as that sometimes, because you don't want to have something in a business that nobody's touching or utilising, that you spend all this money on, and you're not getting the benefit from. And look, I think you need to have a plan around what will you do if you do discover theft, especially with employees. And unfortunately, sometimes they can be long-term employees. They can be people you've had relationships with for a very long time. But ultimately, it is classified as serious misconduct under the Fair Work Act, and there are ways in which you can deal with employees in those situations. And that's certainly something that you need to make sure you're fully aware of, as many of you know how complicated that system is. So always seek advice from a qualified advisor.
Very good. Thank you, Dominic. If anyone's got any questions, please just let us know. In fact, I have a question, Dominic,
yes,
if I can. So I guess I'm curious to know, in terms of your stakeholders, so retailers, whether you're seeing more investment being undertaken in the area of loss prevention. And I'm also curious to know how that affects culture, which you touched on.
Yeah, look, we are seeing more and more investment in loss prevention because it's becoming essential. And, unfortunately for us, the major players have the budget in order to implement these things and, have plainclothes people walking around and, have whole teams. But for us, even, we're seeing a lot more probably investment from your small business as well, especially in regional communities where they are struggling, where the there's been an economic downturn and they're seeing an increase in theft. We have seen a number of vigilantes appear as well. So if you have a look online, there's now a few people running around that are filming people stealing from stores and then confronting them in car parks and having all of that on video so that they can report it directly to the police, because it is becoming, it's almost an epidemic really. And as people continue to have low wage growth, we expect it to increase year on year.
So social policing.
That's the police. I wouldn't encourage that, by the way. But, they have been helpful, but mainly because they collect data. And that's what we need businesses to start doing. We need them to have the information ready to go so that we can actually, catch these people, stop these people, recover the goods. And that's been the real disconnect. Retailers don't see a huge percentage of what they're losing being recovered, especially when it comes to counterfeiting as well.
Yeah, that's great. Excellent. All right, so thanks, Dominique. I might now introduce you to Brad Colbert, who heads up the development of the Retail Defender platform at BizTech. Brad has assisted numerous retail organisations to realise some pretty remarkable ROI through the deployment of an analytics-based loss prevention solution. So I'll hand over to Brad to provide some information around that.
Thanks, Shane, and thanks everyone for attending the call today. So I wanted to quickly touch on a few points around a retail loss prevention platform that we've developed called Retail Defender, which helps retailers to automate the process of continuous monitoring of their network of retail stores for loss coming from a number of different forms. So there's some really interesting statistics that are out there. The Global Retail Theft Barometer is a very comprehensive study that was performed on the sources of loss and the prevalence of loss from a number of different sources across retailers globally. And an interesting point that came out of that study from our perspective was that 55% of the loss that was reported was actually due to internal fraud and admin errors or operational issues. And so, while a lot of the discussion around loss prevention can tend to be on external theft, shoplifting and things along those lines, over half of that loss can actually be coming from inside the organisation. And I would argue that for the quick service restaurants sector of retail, that would be even higher, when compared to, for example, an apparel retailer where shoplifting of goods within stores is a much bigger concern. But for QSR retailers, I think that the demographic of the employee base, the type of product that's being sold, they're very susceptible to this type of internal frauds and operational issues. So at Retail Defender, we've developed a platform that integrates with existing point of sale platforms that any retailer may operate. And so we can take an extract of transactions from each store, and we centralize that onto a cloud-based data management platform that runs automated profiling across those transactions and contextual related information such as time and attendance data, supplier purchase data, or any other data sets that we're able to feed into the platform. And the algorithms that we've developed, which come out of the box with the solution, but can be customized as well, serve as an automated mechanism to surface exceptions where outliers or abnormal activity has been detected, and to alert loss prevention stakeholders within an organisation, whether that's a central loss prevention team, whether that's regional management staff, or an operations team itself. And the way that we like to think about this is from the perspective of what we call top-down loss prevention. What we see is that many retailers tend to take a very ad hoc or manual approach to loss prevention, where they're running a series of ad hoc reports which might check for a specific scenario such as excessive voids or excessive refunds, and then that data may be brought into Excel for manual investigation to move forward. And so the overall process is very slow, laborious, and time-consuming. And so what we've tried to do is to automate that whole process and to provide a platform that centralises the monitoring of all possible loss prevention scenarios, so that you don't have to run 15 separate ad hoc reports to check for 15 separate scenarios that might be occurring in your business. And we take a layered approach to that, where we have a set of dashboards that first identify the suspicious activity, and a set of automated alerting which can be emailed out to stakeholders as well, based on one of 4 streams, whether that's on a particular loss prevention scenario, whether that be compliance to corporate policies, whether that be excessive discounting, order recycling on POS terminals, and that can be then drilled into by store, by employee, or on an ad hoc basis. As you continue with the investigation, we provide a layer below for trending, for comparison to peers, for looking at peer benchmarking as well, through to more detailed transaction level analysis. Often we find that those manual and ad hoc methods are what we call bottom-up loss prevention, where a loss prevention manager may actually start with the transactions and sifting through hundreds and hundreds of transactions for an employee to try and identify anomalies, whereas what we find is this top-down approach is a much more efficient and effective method and allows you to cover a lot more ground with a lot less resource from a loss prevention perspective. Once suspicious activity is identified, you obviously then need to act on that in some way, to continue an investigation, perform observation with that employee, to intervene when appropriate. And to help facilitate that process, we've also developed a case management layer within our platform, which allows you to create a case for further investigation and to assign that through a built-in workflow within the organisation as it progresses through different stages towards recovery. And technology will only take you so far with these kinds of platforms, and many of the things that Dominique referred to in her presentation are very important when it comes to this bottom layer of actually acting on that. So we provide the facility to manage the workflow and to manage the investigation, but your loss prevention policies and procedures that support that platform are just as important in acting on that. So we're not going to provide an interactive demonstration today, but we're happy to arrange that individually with anyone who may be interested. But I have included just a few screenshots to give you an idea of, I guess, the ease of use of the platform, as Dominique referred to as well. It's very visual. It's interactive. Live. It's very fast in its response. Starting with a consolidated view across your network of retail stores, with the ability to drill into one of those, those multiple drill down paths by scenario, by store, by employee, right down to transaction. Case management and a guided investigation process is really the approach that we've taken here. And so when it comes to defining loss prevention and the types of checks that we're doing with platforms like Retail Defender, we check for a number of different sources. Employee fraud is only one source of loss within a retailer, and there's many additional sources such as adherence to corporate policies, training deficiencies, and operational inefficiencies, which can contribute to that 55% of loss which comes from internal means. So it's not just about employee fraud, which is a key takeaway for this discussion, because some retailers that we speak to, for example, may feel that they've got a pretty good check on the employee fraud side of things if they're a smaller retailer in particular. However, loss can be coming from many other sources, purely down to just inefficient training in some cases. When it comes to implementing a solution, the discussion often centres around what should we be focusing those scenarios and those checks and balances on when we actually deploy the system. Should it be largely around employee fraud, POS-based internal fraud checks, or is it actually franchisees who are the highest risk for our business, understating their revenue so as to pay less royalties? Likewise, could it actually be focused more around employee performance and missed opportunities due to certain employees having a lower ATV than others? That can lead to significant loss when aggregated over time as well. And so the scenarios that you develop on a loss prevention platform can be tailored to the area of highest risk for your business. Some examples there of employee and store focused scenarios. We won't go into the detail on those, but again, happy to chat further and to talk through further examples as we get to the panel discussion. A key point that I did want to make is this indicative chart here showing the potential dollars that lost and the increasing dollars that can be lost through internal fraud and operational issues as time goes on. Where retailers are applying manual or ad hoc means of loss prevention, whether having to run reports or use spreadsheets to trawl through transactions, a fair bit of time has usually transpired by the time that particular issue is noted, and therefore the amount of money that's actually been lost in that process is quite significant. The approach that we take with the Retail Defender platform is to automatically monitor every transaction every day, and therefore you're picking up these anomalies much earlier in the process. That leads to the return on your investment in a much faster time frame. We find that, for example, that our customers find that they achieve a positive ROI multiple times over within the first 12 months of deployment. And that comes from a number of different sources, whether it's early identification, more completed investigations, less operational deficiencies and training issues. But interestingly, the simple point of a perceived capability deterrent can be a huge factor in this as well. Most employees are good by nature, and quite often opportunistic fraud is a large portion of the internal loss that's occurring. And so by announcing the platform like this is in place, you can actually have a huge impact on those opportunistic fraudsters straight away. Some examples to finish up on from customers that we have implemented and have published case studies for a loss prevention solution. Collins Foods Limited was an early implementation that we did across their KFC and Sizzler brands. You can see here a quote from their loss prevention manager, which highlights the impact that the solution had on their business. And probably the other key point that I'll call out on that particular case study is that we went from a concept to full deployment within 5 weeks. And in fact, this deployment actually included us setting up a replication of transactions from each store back to a central repository. Whereas these days we find that most retailers already have that process set up, and we can skip that part of the implementation. So very fast deployment when you take the approach of leveraging a platform that provides these out of the box capabilities, such as Retail Defender. Dominos Pizza is another early customer of ours deploying a loss prevention solution. Another interesting comment there about the impact that has had on their business from their loss prevention manager. And interestingly, in this particular scenario, it was the reduced workload placed on IT, which was a huge factor in the deployment as well. Previously, the loss prevention team was having to go back to IT and request transaction extracts on a regular basis. And that placed a very manual and large burden on that team as well. So the other key point there is on the second day of deployment, they achieved a very interesting find and were able to take action and process and achieve a recovery from that individual.
Very good, excellent. Thank you, Brad. Please, if you've got any questions, please just unmute yourself and ask away, or tap something into the chat. We'll be happy to respond. While everybody is doing that or thinking about that, what we might do is now bring our panelists online, and as I say, we invite you to join in the conversation here, and please unmute yourself, type in any questions you might have regarding the topic of the future of loss prevention. While everyone's thinking about those questions, I might start things off. Nicola, if I can put you on the spot there, hopefully we've got you unmuted there. I have my own question about Krispy Kreme and where I can get a donut sundae on a day like this here in Brisbane, which would be a nice friend. But maybe I'll ask you a more pertinent question. That is, curious to know how Krispy Kreme is tackling the challenges around loss prevention.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to what both Brad and Dominique were referring to, I think a large part of loss prevention is trying to make the whole process more intuitive for our staff and our customers. So a big focus that we've done at Krispy Kreme is really focusing on the POS system and trying to make that process as streamlined as possible. For us at Krispy Kreme, I think the easiest way that we've been able to identify any kind of loss prevention situations is generally wherever we see unnecessary pauses in a process or duplication of process for no reason. I think one of the big technology changes that we had a number of years ago was the integration of FPOS and credit card transactions into the POS, obviously eliminating that process of duplication of having to have staff manually enter prices, obviously caused a significant reduction in loss prevention for us. And from that process, we've kind of gone, well, what other parts of the POS system can we streamline and make simpler for the staff to use, and make it more obvious to the managers if something's not going according to the plan, or if a staff member is deviating from standard process. A big thing that we've implemented is trying to design our POS system to be in line with how our transactions occur, so that all transactions happen in a conversational ordering process, so that it's really quick and simple, and you can tell straight away if a staff member is deviating from standard process.
Yeah, right. And that's helped to improve that operational efficiency, I guess, by having a POS that's more aligned to your work processes.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, trying to understand exactly how the consumer is coming in and purchasing from us, and then making sure that the transaction process matches that in the most efficient and effective way as possible.
Yeah, okay.
Just as an interesting comment on the back of that point, actually, we had an example where a customer was identifying a high number of cancelled transactions through our solution, and upon further investigation, it turned out that the actual cause of that wasn't internal fraud or employee theft at all. It was actually the fact that the POS system was designed that the seniors discount button was only available at the start of the order process. However, it was quite often that a customer would forget to actually mention that they've got a seniors discount until the end of the order process, and so the employee had to cancel the order and start again in order to apply that. And so a very simple change to the POS workflow was able to eliminate that that's erroneous data and those transactions from the whole platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And even for us, we were seeing a number of voided transactions whereby, customers were coming in, purchasing a dozen donuts and then deciding they wanted to upgrade and purchase a multi-dozen pack. Same thing, our old POS system didn't allow that to be added without a void. But integrating it to auto bundle, eliminated that process and, obviously reduces the number of investigations that you might have to have for unnecessary voids.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess I might just open questions up to the panel in general and put it out there. And Justine's going to join in on the panel. Thanks, Justine.
I am. Can you hear me, guys?
We can definitely hear you.
Yes.
Okay. So I've got a couple of questions. One big one, right, is the rise of the group aggregators, the menu logs, the Deliveroos, the Uber Eats. They're really changing the industry in a pretty fundamental way. Question for the panel is, what kind of impact are you seeing with this rise of the aggregators on the impact of loss prevention?
Actually, there's been a 78% increase on fraud association with card not present. So because those platforms typically have a credit card attached, there is now the risk that even though you think it's been paid, it hasn't been paid. We've also seen it where they're having food even delivered to the wrong address or to a hotel or something along those lines, picking up the food, having a false booking with a hotel, and then cancelling the booking and the card disappears. So that's certainly something to consider in this space if engaging with those platforms.
We've done some work with retailers who have had instances where franchisees have almost used those aggregators such as Menulog and others as an off-the-books set of ordering, where transactions that come in store that they go through the POS system. However, transactions that come in via Uber Eats or Menulog, they don't actually put through the POS in order to avoid paying royalties on those transactions. Now, in that particular case, Menulog was the primary focus, and they were actually very good in providing an extract of data to match up with POS transactions to the master franchisor. And so I think over time what we're going to see is those third-party aggregators providing better access to their data via APIs and other means to integrate into POS platforms and loss prevention solutions like Retail Defender.
Nicola, do you have a viewpoint on that in terms of do you guys do much aggregators?
Yes. So we've partnered with Uber Eats, and for us, we've been working with them to integrate reports to correlate with our POS data as well, and they've been really supportive in trying to reconcile that and work with us to ensure that it's consistent.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the good news is that the stories that I've heard to date have been that these third parties are quite good to work with in terms of supplying data back to retailers, which I hope will continue to be the case.
Ask away, Justine.
Okay, great. So those people out there that are listening to the webinar and they're interested in finding out more information and particularly selling this internal to their internal teams, getting internal buy-in, what's your advice?
My advice is probably that you need to take the employees on the journey, as opposed to making them feel as if you don't trust them. I mean, trust is such a big intrinsic motivator for employee groups. So it's important to show them, I guess, the impact on the business and what it means for the business. So whether that be productivity, whether that be the fact that it's impacting their bottom line and they can't put on as many shifts or employees, and really making employees aware, I guess, why it's in their interest to assist in this process. And you know, and often I find that the best way to do that is, you know, to have the system presented to them, or to let them play with the system, or to show them, you know, some of the exciting things that it can do, so that they, you know, feel part of kind of a family, so to speak. And that seems to kind of trickle down in terms of the way that they certainly deal with even observing, you know, other employees and other customers.
Yeah.
From our perspective, I think that you know, being able to see a solution in action really helps quite a lot. And to that end, we offer a no-cost proof of concept process, where we take an extract of a sample of data and actually load that up into our platform and make that available back to retailers to use internally to drive buy-in and awareness of the capabilities of a solution, an automated loss prevention solution. And I think that the other great thing in this space is that we can calculate an ROI based on some of the statistics and the experiences that we've had with other retailers. And, you know, I think in the invitation for this session, we quoted an anecdotal statistic of up to 7% of revenue could be being lost by some retailers. That's based on a real statistic from customer conversations that we've had. And while 7% of revenue may seem like quite a lot, if you stop and actually think about the numbers that calculates out to, even if you scale that back to 1% of revenue for most retailers, that's still a very significant number, and as we said earlier, can bring a return on investment multiple times over, even within 12 months. And so I think by laying out the business case in that way, and by showing the capabilities in action, goes a long way towards buying in, to promoting internal buy-in for these kinds of solutions.
I'd be also interested in the panel's opinion on that 7% figure. Retail Defender, you said that you've seen 7% of revenue can be lost. Would you say that that's pretty, would the panel agree with that figure? Is that, to some of our listeners today, is that what they're seeing in some of their figures? I'd just be interested to get some feedback.
Yeah, I think at Krispy Kreme, similar to what you were touching on, Brad, being, you know, for us, the idea that staff theft would be potentially up to 55% of potential theft, I would agree that in our case could have been a lot higher. And I think that the reality of, you know, 7% saving is realistic if you haven't focused on it before. I think some of the, you know, the current circumstances that employees are going through in Australia, you know, with a large portion of part-time workers, you know, the temptation is real. I think if the staff are unaware, or management team are unaware that's occurring, or in denial about it, I think, just talking to them about the current, you know, economical climate in Australia, it is reasonable, and the temptation is there. And I guess for us, it's really about reducing that temptation period and educating the team on how to identify it.
Perhaps I can put a question forward and include yourself too, Justin, in response to this. Curious to know what sort of technology changes you've seen or you're witnessing, and I'm curious to know, is it helping or hindering the industry in some shape or form? And this is specifically addressed to loss prevention. Is technology helping with the process around loss prevention?
Look, I think it certainly is from our membership's perspective. You know, whilst they accept that there is a cost associated with technology, I mean, the reality is that they are able to prevent more and more theft occurring in whatever form that is. And I think, as you pointed out prior, Brad, you know, just having that deterrent as well seems to be such a key factor. And we certainly know that, you know, and that works, you know, obviously with external theft as well, you know, having a security guard present. I mean, not that any of our retailers want to do that because it deters people from coming in the store, but definitely having a very clear presence of, you know, a way to be caught seems to work quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. From a technology perspective, from my opinion, I mean, even if we think back 10 years ago, we were talking with retailers who were literally printing out extract of transactions and going through with a pen and a highlighter to try to identify anomalous transactions. And, in that particular case, it was taking this poor loss prevention manager 4 weeks to complete an investigation. And, he was trying to cover a network of 500 retail stores. And so you can imagine that he wasn't even scratching the surface with what was actually occurring within that business. Moving forward to today, I think the sophistication of point of sale platforms has increased quite a lot, and so we are seeing data being centralised much more readily these days. However, we see that people are sort of still spending a lot of time in spreadsheets, manually going through transactions, which are probably the modern day pen and highlighter, I guess. And so moving forward, I think we'll start to see automated loss prevention platforms become a lot more prevalent to enable retailers to do a lot more with a lot less. Usually loss prevention teams are relatively small within retail organisations, and so they're being asked to do more and more, whilst also flying the country, interviewing staff and performing investigations. So, as an example, one of our customers is covering a network of 1,500 stores with one loss prevention manager and 2 loss prevention analysts.
Nicola and Justine, would love to hear your thoughts, your views.
Yeah, no, I think technology is certainly helping, not hindering. I think the speed that we can access data now compared to years ago is phenomenal. A lot of operational managers don't have a huge amount of time dedicated to investigate loss prevention. I think getting the reports automated now has made a huge impact. I think one of the things that was touched on earlier today as well around being able to drill down into average spend differences by employee is really interesting as well, because it can highlight potential training deficiencies or motivation deficiencies in the team, not just straight theft.
I guess we'll put a question out there. Sorry, Justine, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think there's a huge digital transformation happening in food service, and I'll be interested to see where it's going to end up. I do have another question, really, for Nicola or for anyone else out there listening. It'd be great to hear some of the war stories. So have you got any examples where you've uncovered fraud, caught the person out, what was happening, and how you kind of resolved it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in with an example if no one else wants to go first. For us, we had a severe case of theft occurring at one of our stores a couple of years ago, and for us, we tried to review. We knew the theft was occurring, but we weren't sure at what part of the process was happening. All we knew was that from the money being reported in our shop to the money that was hitting our bank, there was a deficiency. So we actually engaged with our cash collection agency to assist in the investigation. And through that process, we were able to review all the potential steps of duplication or points whereby staff might be altering reports or the amount of money that they were reporting, or the number of times that they could potentially be taking it in that whole process. And it was really helpful to do that with our cash collection agency assisting. And in that process, we found deficiencies both in our business and in their business, and we're able to really streamline the process. We adapted the tools that we were using to deposit money, and we ended up updating our safes to safes that integrated cash counting into them as well, which was an incredible process. Obviously, return on investment from a labour saving, but also just reducing the chance of miscounts as well. So that was a great process, and certainly I think it's worthwhile engaging in partners and not always trying to solve it on your own as a retail business, but working with other partners, whether it's someone like BizTech or if you have a cash collection agency, even working with them to try and work out where the parts of the process are going wrong.
Yeah, great. We've had a number of really interesting examples which we could give. One to mention is the baby chino gates, as we like to call it, where we noticed that there was a concentration of stores within Victoria. It happened to be that were transacting a very high number of low value transactions. Drilling into that in more detail, we found that multiple employees within those particular stores were actually putting through a high number of $1 baby chinos and 30-cent tomato sauces, and way more than you would think is legitimate based on the normal pattern of transactions. And it turned out that these employees were systematically putting through legitimate customer orders as $1 baby chinos and then keeping the difference in the customer payment for themselves. So that's a very simple and basic example, and it's also a really good example of where that started with one employee working this loophole out in the system, telling a colleague of theirs within that same store. That colleague then told a friend of theirs within another store in the same region, and it jumped and quickly accelerated across the network of retail stores. And luckily it was picked up before it managed to get too broad, and there was processes put in place to try to prevent that as well. But there's also some other examples of sort of larger, more systematic fraud that we could cite, at the franchisee level, where franchisees were, or even collusion between corporate store managers and franchisees, where for example, in a business, we found a corporate store manager stealing boxes of cheese from their own freezer and then selling those boxes of cheese to franchisees for half the price that the franchisee would pay for that box from the approved supplier. And so, there was no skin off the nose of the corporate store manager, but the franchisee got that same box for half price. So just another example that we've come across.
Yes.
I'd like to just perhaps pause, please. If anyone on the call would like to ask a question, please feel free to do so. Jimmy, I see you're online there from Minor DKL. I'm sure you're itching to ask a question. So welcome you to unmute and ask away. But if there's anyone else on the line there that would like to ask a question, please do so. Justine, did you have any other questions you'd like to surface?
Look, Nicola kind of touched on it a little bit. I guess what's another evolution in terms of technology is a kind of cashless economy, and seeing more and more cashless transactions. Indeed, some QSRs are purely cashless. You can't pay with cash. What impact does the panel think that is going to have on loss prevention, for the positive or the negative?
Someone want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I'll jump in, and I think that it's a really interesting point, and it's definitely something that is helping with some of the more opportunistic fraud that occurs with cash. Such as the baby chino example that I gave, where there is an opportunity where cash is involved for a customer for an employee to transact a sale as something that it's not, and then pocket the difference in customer payment. With cashless, that opportunity is reduced, but it does also introduce additional complexity and another set of considerations that we need to build loss prevention scenarios around. So there's any number that could be open, but it certainly does reduce complexity where we're minimising the amount of cash that's involved.
Yeah.
I'll jump in there as well, if you like. For us at Krispy Kreme, we also sell products at football stadiums, and our staffing base at those particular sites is a much higher portion of part-time and particularly casual workforce. In that situation, we saw the loss prevention at a greater risk. So in that circumstance, we're actually trialling completely cashless at certain parts of the stadium, and we've seen no reduction in sales in doing that process, but obviously a much safer guarantee that loss prevention is occurring.
Yeah. Right. Maybe I can ask away with a question. Given the collective knowledge that we have on the panel, and interested to get your thoughts about where you see loss prevention, where the future is, where it's headed in retail. what are the strategies that retailers are putting in place for future-proofing?
Look, certainly from our perspective, we're seeing it become something that's such a priority that they're now designing their fit outs based on, how to best prevent. And we've certainly seen that. I don't know how many of you have recently been into the new format Kmart or Target stores, where they've got the registers right in the middle of the store, as opposed to at the edge when you walk through to go out. But we're definitely seeing a lot more restructure in terms of visibility, exits, placement of stock, things like that. There's definitely been an investment in employing more loss prevention professionals as well. So whether that be at a head office level, whether it be at a training level or simply, going through stores. There is also a significant investment from shopping centres more and more now around as well, not just simply having your security guards, but also I think technology, as you said, is becoming more and more important. So, whether that be something like Retail Defender, whether it be facial recognition, the implementation of more and more CCTV, and even just even some of our marketing technology around beacons and things like that are now being utilised. So, where you can push notify customers, about certain, sales. They're also being used to collect data as well from those customers that enter stores at what time, and that can also be linked to some of the data that's been collected by Retail Defender in terms of spending and what they purchase, because sometimes now loyalty programs are so instant that if there is an inconsistency, you can use that as proof as well. So it's definitely evolving very quickly.
While I've got you responding to that, Dominic, do your stakeholders see loss prevention as being competitive advantage? Is that?
Yeah, I think, and in fact what we've seen, and it's been quite significant, we run a very large awards program which is called Young Retailer of the Year, and we have significant entries for young people in that category. It's quite rigorous, there's testing and they've got to put forward a business case, but more and more these young people are putting forward loss prevention strategies and implementing them, whether it be in an independent liquor store, in Tasmania, or whether it be in a larger store that simply just may not have the technology that even suits their size. It's becoming such a focus now that, even our younger workers are starting to design ways to allow their store to be, better off than others in that area, because they know obviously if they can reduce their shrinkage, then their figures are going to look better, and in turn they get promoted. So there's definitely a focus.
And their future is more stable.
That's right. That's right.
An employee. Brad, Nicola, or Justine, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I've got another question, if that's okay. It's really across the spectrum of the industry, and maybe Dominic's best to kind of start on this. So, Dominic, you'd have a unique insight, again, into the spectrum of the industry, the spectrum of retailers. Are you still finding, from what you're observing, that a lot of retailers are still using a very manual process, i.e. looking at data from multiple sources to identify fraud or losses? Or are you finding that there's a lot of maturity the way that they're using technology to address some of these issues?
I think that you're right. There is a lot of people still looking at manual data, and they aren't necessarily evolving as quickly as what we would like. But we are seeing a shift towards technology, certainly with Amazon coming into the market now. It's become the new focus where people are looking for certainly automated, digital and technologically savvy ways to just do things to save them time and money. So it's really become, I think, a point of competition where they're starting to invest in things that makes their lives easier. So, but you're right, there's still a lot of people using multiple systems to look at data.
Yeah, right. So a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, they don't, because we see a lot of a really kind of lethargy in terms of reporting. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that they don't have systems in place necessarily to give them that data as quickly as possible so that they can utilise it to reduce the problem. So for us, it's been definitely about an educational piece, and even just trying to get retailers to communicate with each other. Because where we can see patterns in parts of the industry, there's things that we can do about it, but we find it very difficult to convince them to kind of let some of this information out so that they can collaborate, as opposed to keeping it protected because we don't want anyone to know how much we're losing.
I see.
From our perspective, we've seen in the past that retailers have been somewhat limited by the capabilities of their point of sale system in approaching loss prevention, or alternatively, there's only been a few different multinational vendors on the market that were providing loss prevention capabilities, and they were multi-million-dollar implementations, very big end of town, and they weren't so approachable to small and mid-sized retailers. And so the approach that we've taken with Retail Defender is to sort of take some of that market-leading capability and to provide it, leverage some advances in cloud computing so that we can make these things available at a much lower price point. And make them deployable in a very quick way as well. So try to reduce the barriers to entry for automated loss prevention for retailers is very, very key to the strategy that we have moving forward.
Yeah.
Perfect. And on that collaboration piece, does the panel or Dominique, do you have any examples where the industry can work together to combat loss prevention?
Yeah, look, definitely. When we look at, I guess, loss prevention, we know that there are certain communities within Australia that have significantly high loss, within a certain kilometre radius and certain centres. Now, in those situations where retailers have been willing to collaborate with each other and to disclose kind of the effects on their business, within those communities, we have been able to, in some instances, have small police task force put in place, so that they can then really focus on kind of why are we getting such loss in this community and where are the flow-on effects from that. And what we found is that there have been prosecutions and significant imprisonments that have occurred as a result of retailers actually communicating with not only each other to assist in preventing something from occurring, but also with police and other community bodies that can help them really look at why is it in this area and kind of where is this money or where is this stock going.
Just conscious of time, we're right on the mark for the webinar, so we may have to just draw stumps and conclude there. Just want to reiterate that this session has been recorded and will be made available post-event. We will be emailing out the 8 high-risk loss prevention scenarios every retailer should monitor guide, and we'll send a link inviting you to engage with the Retail Defender ROI calculator. I want to thank you, Justine, and the QSR for organising this briefing, and of course thank our panellists, Nicola, Dominique and Brad, for being participating this morning, and thank you, of course, everyone on the line for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.